When you're ready.
How do athletes overcome mental health challenges? Mental health is really important for athletes, especially those performing at high levels. However, it is often over-stigmatized and overlooked. The culture of sports emphasizes strength, power, and invulnerability, often seeing vulnerability as a weakness. An example of this is when the International Olympic Committee says faster, higher, stronger. Athletes feel pressure to perform their best in their athletic performance. They want to appear both physically and mentally strong. Student athletes feel extra pressure to perform well in school, maintain high grades, and perform their best in their athletics. This pressure to win can result in burnout, decreased motivation, and loss of interest in their sport. There's also a fear of failure. Coaches have been known in the past to be hard on their athletes and yell and shame the athletes who make a mistake. This often does not encourage the top performance. Instead, it makes these athletes afraid to make a mistake and step out of their comfort zone, and often leads athletes to quit their sports. So athletes use courage to overcome mental health challenges by being open to vulnerability and facing their challenges head on without listening to the stigmas. Vulnerability is the key to courage. However, vulnerability in sports is often not accepted and it's seen as a weakness. Many athletes do not want to accept when they are feeling weak or vulnerable, so instead, they'll often hide behind an injury. Simone Biles is someone that did not do this. She admitted when she was willing to be vulnerable and told people exactly what was happening. She opted out of the 2020 Olympics when she started experiencing the twisties, which is a mental block that gymnastics often experience where they lose track of their position midair. At the time, she reported that I have to focus on my mental health and not jeopardize my health and well-being. She faced backlash online from people that thought her withdrawal was a moment of weakness or that she abandoned her teammates. But others, like Joan Ryan, a sports journalist who writes about the mental and physical abuse of gymnastics, saw this act as a testament of how the brutal and harsh treatment of gymnasts can wear down even the strongest of athletes. The culture of sports says that Biles should have powered through and ignored her doubts and anxieties. What she did instead was face the reality of what she was going through and took the break when she needed to. Simone Biles showed her bravery and courage by being open to her struggles and putting her mental health first. This creates an example for other athletes to do the same. Courage is important for athletes. When looking at courage, it can be seen in different ways. One is physical and the other is moral. In the article, Moral Courage and Intelligent Disobedience, it explains that using moral courage is important for overcoming adversity and standing up for what's wrong. However, it does explain that moral courage is a lonely courage. It risks being isolated and singled out for a painful personal consequence. Michael Phelps is an Olympic swimmer who has dealt with his fair share of mental challenges. He has become an advocate for mental health for athletes. After dealing with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, Phelps decided that it was time for him to get help. Phelps has become an example of why it is important to get help, and he shows people that it is okay to get help. He uses his experience and moral courage to share his story and encourage others to get help. Phelps' bravery for becoming an advocate for mental health inspires many others to seek help themselves. He has paved the way for a more open and supportive environment for athletes. Jamie Hull, the lead sports psychologist at Ohio State, says that it takes serious bravery for these high-profile athletes to come out and use the word depression or use the word anxiety. When these big-name athletes are willing to step up and say that they're struggling, it creates an example for these younger athletes to do the same. Some of the many steps that these athletes can do to help their mental health include making time for relaxing activities, asking for help from professionals who can provide counseling and support, and staying connected to teammates, family, friends, or anyone else that can provide the support that you need. It can take an athlete a lot of courage to stand up and say that they're struggling with their mental health. However, mental health is really important. Mental health is just as important, if not more important, than your physical health. Some of the limitations tie back to stigmas. These include the vulnerability in athletes not wanting to appear weak or vulnerable, the pressure to perform, which adds a lot to these athletes' plates that is really hard for these athletes to handle by themselves, and a fear of failure. Athletes do not want to admit when they're struggling because they are truly afraid to look like a failure. In conclusion, athletes use courage, especially moral courage, to overcome their mental health challenges by being willing to be vulnerable and open to their challenges. Taking care of your mental health allows you to build resilience, find balance, and stay focused in the intense world of athletics. This ultimately leads to an increased athletic performance and overall a better mental health.
Thank you. Brooklyn, what information did you need you weren't able to find or locate?
So when I first started, I was going to look more into how injuries affected athletes' mental health. But as I was looking through stories and like the story about Phelps and the story about Biles, I didn't find much about how injuries specifically affected them. So I focused more on just the mental health aspect and kind of kept it broad.
Okay, thank you. What are the implications of your findings to our community?
Well, mental health will always be important for these athletes. So athletes these days need to learn how to take care of their mental health because it will ultimately lead to increased physical performance and just overall a better experience with their sports.
Okay, thank you. Another round of applause.